Πάμε τώρα, κυρίες και κύριοι, να δούμε ποιες είναι οι πραγματικές επιπτώσεις στην παγκόσμια οικονομία και την άνοδο της τιμής του πετρελαίου από τις εξελίξεις και τον πόλεμο στη Μέση Ανατολή. Ο καθήλυν αρμόδιος για να τα συζητήσουμε αυτά είναι ο John Sitilides, στρατηγικός αναλυτής και πρώην συνεργάτης του Υπουργείου Εξωτερικών των ΗΠΑ με βάση την Ουάσιγκτον. Καλησπέρα, John.
Καλησπέρα Γιώργο και ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για αυτήν την πρόσκληση να συζητήσουμε μερικά από τα πιο σοβαρά θέματα που βλέπουμε γύρω τον κόσμο σήμερα. Σας ευχαριστώ.
Εμείς ευχαριστούμε που είσαι μαζί μας. Η πρώτη ερώτηση που έχω να κάνω, Τζον, έχει να κάνει με τα στενά του Ορμούζ. Εάν η κρίση παραταθεί και παραμείνουν κλειστά για μεγάλο χρονικό διάστημα, σε ποιο σημείο πιστεύετε ότι θα περάσουμε από το σοκ λόγω αυτής της εξέλιξης σε μια δομική παγκόσμια οικονομική κρίση λόγω της άνοδος της τιμής του πετρελαίου?
Yorgo, we are entering a period of great flux and uncertainty, both about the potential hopeful conclusion of the war sometime in the next several weeks, but also the short-term, medium-term, and long-term repercussions of the cutoff of oil and gas deliveries from the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz to markets in Asia and Europe and around the world. Right now, we're very much concerned about the price of oil exceeding $100, maybe as much as $120 to $140 in the next several weeks. But I think there's a larger issue here as well. Even if the price of oil comes down again to $90, $80, or even $60 a barrel, the way it was before the war began, I think what we have here is a tremendous uncertainty and nervousness going forward about the assured delivery of oil and liquefied natural gas out of the Persian Gulf, unless we have a very different regime in Tehran. The extent to which a new regime, that of the son of the assassinated Supreme Leader Khamenei, or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, retains power in Tehran and is able to threaten shipping and to convince the insurance shipping companies to no longer insure these ships coming out of the Persian Gulf, we're going to see potential shocks again. So what we need to see ultimately is a long-term assurance that there will be no further threats or degradation of shipping of oil and LNG out of the Persian Gulf for the long term. And only then do I think we'll get oil and gas down to where it was before. Otherwise, I think we're going to see up and down cycles for the remainder of the year.
Μάλιστα. Και Τζον, χθες ο Διεθνής Οργανισμός Ενέργειας ανακοίνωσε μια πρωτοφανή συμφωνία για αποδέσμευση αριθμού ρεκόρ 400 εκατομμυρίων βαρελιών από τα αποθεματικά, προκειμένου να υπάρξει μια αποσυμπίεση στην αγορά ενέργειας. Πόσο πιστεύετε ότι θα ανακουφίσει την αγορά μια τέτοια κίνηση? Είναι αρκετή επί της ουσίας για να ρίξει τις τιμές ή απλώς αγοράζει χρόνο?
I think it's more of a short-term balm, especially for energy investors in markets around the world. The issue is not so much supply. There is plenty of supply to meet demand around the world. The problem is flow, F-L-O-W. If there is not an assured flow, constant flow of oil and natural gas coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, out of the Persian Gulf, that's where we see the long-term impacts, not only for energy markets, but also for petrochemicals, for fertilizers, for the products that make up about 95% of the everyday items that consumers in Greece and around the world use in their daily lives. And so flow is the issue, and it's really going to come back to getting the Strait of Hormuz opened again. Now, the degree to which this is helpful in reassuring markets that there are efforts that are being made may keep the price from jumping further higher anytime in the near future, but it's not going to bring the price of gasoline down anytime soon, or of oil, because again, as long as the flow is uninterrupted, there isn't enough in these strategic petroleum reserves to provide the long-term assurance that energy markets need to be able to keep their industries going. And we're also going to see this kind of impact affecting the strategic petroleum reserves of individual countries. You see this taking place now in Japan, where they're looking to release oil not only for domestic purposes, but also potentially to provide for other Asian economies. China is in a very comfortable position right now, given its massive reserves. The US is maybe a question mark because the Biden administration had released massive amounts of petroleum in 2022 and 2023 to reduce the price of gasoline for everyday American consumers with the aftershock of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I think it's a good measure, but will it solve anything in terms of the flow of oil to markets around the world? Not after the first several days and weeks.
Μάλιστα, και επειδή αναφέρατε τη Ρωσία, ένα ερώτημα το οποίο τίθεται κιόλας μετά τις δηλώσεις της Προέδρου της Κομισιόν της Ursula von der Leyen, η οποία δήλωσε ότι θα ήταν ένα στρατηγικό λάθος η αξιοποίηση των ρωσικών πηγών ενέργειας και των ρωσικών ορυκτών καυσίμων, είναι αν πραγματικά οι Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες, η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, η Δύση εν τέλει, έχει άλλη επιλογή και αν όντως θα αποφύγει να χρησιμοποιήσει την ρωσική ενέργεια.
Again, the energy markets will likely determine the ultimate flow direction of Russian oil and gas. Europe or the European Union has made a strategic political decision given the shock of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But we know, first of all, that there are countries inside of the European Union, namely Hungary and Slovakia, that continue to depend on hydrocarbon deliveries from Russia. We have a number of countries, including France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, that were continuing to import major amounts of liquefied natural gas. And it was only under the edict of Brussels that those are coming to a close at the end of this calendar year. And that's if they're able to meet supplies from other parts of the world, including the United States. But I think there's going to be a very serious question going forward about the extent to which we're going to have an equilibrium again in oil and gas supplies in global markets. Look, to a large degree, it makes strategic sense for Europe to not become dependent on Russia anytime soon, given the fact that Russia is a hostile power that has very inimical interests to the security architecture of Europe, and for that matter, of the NATO alliance, and the fact that there are so many supplies that are available from other parts of the world. But I think the real question that the European Union leadership should be asking itself is, why should Europe be dependent on oil and natural gas from other parts of the world when there are significant shale basins beneath the European continent? And that's why you have countries like Norway that have the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, or one of the largest, because they've made the very wise strategic decision to exploit that very rich North Sea oil and gas exported around the world, even as they electrify their economy and bring in significant revenues. So Greece and other European countries really need to look, first of all, to domestic sources of energy to be as self-sufficient as possible, then rely on friendly countries such as the United States, obviously, for oil and liquefied natural gas deliveries, and then potentially consider the return of nuclear energy, which is carbon-free and energy-dense and the most efficient use of energy, so that European economies can reindustrialize, repower, and make Europe a geopolitically serious contender on the world stage again, because it's really fallen off the mark over the last 15 to 20 years, again, because of foolish dependency on Russia and because of climate alarmism that is impoverishing almost every country in the European Union.
Μάλιστα. Και να σας φέρω σε ένα θέμα το οποίο έχει και άμεση σχέση με την καθημερινότητα που ζείτε στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες της Αμερικής και στην Ουάσιγκτον όπου διαβιείτε. Ο Ντόναλντ Τραμπ δηλώνει συνεχώς τα τελευταία 24 ώρα ότι ο πόλεμος θα τελειώσει σύντομα. Πρόκειται για δηλώσεις οι οποίες έχουν να κάνουν όντως με τη διάθεσή του να λήξει αυτή η πολεμική επιχείρηση ή πιέζεται σε έναν βαθμό και από την αύξηση της τιμής της βενζίνης και του πετρελαίου στην εγχώρια αγορά, γιατί βλέπουμε ότι όντως έχει υπάρξει και όπως διαβάζουμε σε αμερικανικά δίκτυα μια αύξηση της τάξης του 20 με 30% το γαλόνι στα βενζινάδικα.
Right. And when you start to have price increases at that level, it becomes a potential crisis for a sitting U.S. president and for federal lawmakers in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. First of all, let me just remind your audience, as we do here in the United States, that again, and it needs to be stated over and over again, that President Trump is not a conventional politician that has come up through the ranks of party politics and parliament or the Congress here in the United States. He's a businessman. He considers himself to be a master negotiator, and he is a constant salesman of his policies and also a maximalist negotiator, putting forward, for instance, to the Iranian regime that they must submit to unconditional surrender for the war to end, and then saying the next day that the war may end next week or at some point whenever he thinks that it's the right time to end the war. And those really are contradictory positions. And it's difficult enough for us Americans here to try to keep up with the rhetoric of this maximalist negotiator and businessman who brings a very different style to diplomacy and, frankly, now to war. We don't know to what extent the war will be concluded anytime soon because it's not only the United States who has a say in this. Iran has a say in this as well. And they may decide once the U.S. Joint strikes with Israel are ended that Iran may continue to close off the Persian Gulf, may continue to hit at energy infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Iraq, in Qatar, to punish those countries for siding with the United States. So we don't know when the hostilities will end, but hopefully, at least from what we're hearing from the Pentagon with our daily briefings over here, there has been a very profound and very strong degradation of the Iranian ballistic missile program. Hopefully, we can take out their drone production facilities. Hopefully, we can continue to eliminate the leadership, political and military, in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and degrade the command and control functions of the IRGC so that they stop, one, attacking shipping in the Persian Gulf, B, stop attacking their Gulf Arab countries, and C, stop funding terrorist proxies throughout the Middle East, Europe, and the United States. These are going to be the essential programs and objectives in order for the war to at least be ended from Washington's perspective. And if those demands have not been met and those objectives have not been achieved, then I'm afraid that the Iranian regime, simply by surviving one of the most punishing military strikes in modern history, will proclaim itself to be a winner, much like Saddam Hussein did after the first Persian Gulf War in the early 1990s. So there's no clear definition that we can see right now for ending the war, either from Washington's perspective or from Tehran's perspective. And we'll see to what extent the actual military campaign is enough to bring the Iranian regime to its knees. But this is a very resilient government. They had been prepared for this war. And as we know, the now dead supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, had arranged for 4 layers of succession. And we have the IRGC commanders that are operating pretty much freely, almost as rogue operators without any centralized command, just to inflict as much damage and chaos throughout the Middle East as possible. So this is going to be potentially a very long-term problem, even if the actual kinetic components of the war are ended, at least from the U.S. side, sometime in March or early April.
Μάλιστα. Αγαπητέ John Sitilides, θέλω να σε ευχαριστήσω για τη συνέντευξη και τον σχολιασμό σου για τις εξελίξεις στη Μέση Ανατολή. Καλό σου απόγευμα.
Και εγώ σας ευχαριστώ πολύ. Καλό απόγευμα.
Να είστε καλά. Στο σημείο αυτό εμείς, κυρίες και κύριοι, ολοκληρώνουμε τη σύνδεσή μας για όλες τις εξελίξεις στη Μέση Ανατολή και τον πόλεμο ο οποίος μένεται με αμείωτη ένταση. Μπορείτε να διαβάζετε ό,τι επιθυμείτε στο πρώτοθέμα.gr και ειδικά για όλες τις εξελίξεις που αφορούν στο μέτωπο της Μέσης Ανατολής. Καλό σας απόγευμα.